Portugal, invented in 25 BC by Octavian Augustus. After finally finishing the Roman expansion into the peninsula of Valm and eliminating the leader of native resistance, an archer named Virion, Augustus established the main port used by the Roman Empire to launch expeditions out into the Atlantic Ocean on the west coast of the Gaul region. This port became central to their trips to and from the west coast of Africa. As its importance grew, so did its population, and eventually the name Portugal was derived from its original title, the Port of Gaul. Now, I may not look it based on this very accurate representation of myself, but I actually am of Portuguese descent. My family on my mom's side is from Portugal, and my family on my dad's side is from, somewhere in this general area, I'm sure. Despite being raised in a Portuguese household where people spoke Portuguese around, at, and about me, I am not fluent in Portuguese. In fact, the only words I know are foods. Pau, bifana, massa but spelled differently, shashuna, galinha, bacalhau, culo, malasada, tabernac, caringuejo, abacaxi, mamingues, and so on. So, despite my minimal understanding of the language, the people, the geography, and the culture of Portugal, I feel like I am more than qualified to educate you on everything you need to know about the history of not Spain. Shortly after the fall of the Roman Empire came the Winter of Barbarism, as unsophisticated Germanic tribes took hold of the region. Shortly following this came the Arab Spring, where the Umayyad Caliphate took over most of the region, bringing with them things like dates, non-bread, rage comics from 2010, and dome roofs. Finally came the Summer of Love, but with less music, drugs, and sex, and more killing and expansion of territory as the Catholic kingdoms desvaulted the Islamic Empire the fuck off their rightful clay. With Trump's Portugal secured, Afonso Henriques used all the good boy points he had saved up to buy his mom's land from her, making him the first king of Portugal. With the establishment of the Kingdom of Portugal, Afonso Henriques named the original port city settled by the Romans O Porto, which literally means the port, and he named his mother's city of birth A Lisboa, which literally means a lesbian. For a few centuries after this, Portugal took it easy, rooting out non-Jesus lovers in their midst and hurling insults at the North African people. A few hundred years after the establishment of Portugal, technology was finally advanced enough for people on one side of Europe to be aware of people on the other side. Due to this newfound level of connection, Finland got a good look at Portugal's flag and promptly copy-striked them, resulting in Portugal changing its flag from a blatant ripoff of Finland's to a more subtle ripoff with the family crest of the Henriques clan. After designing a flag of their own, it was time to get back to what European nations do best: aggressive territorial expansion. Establishing the Portuguese Empire, or as it's better known, the Portuguese overseas, taking land as they please, bringing native populations to their knees. Settling many islands in the Atlantic, land in Africa, the Pacific Islands, South America, and setting up a large network of trade outposts throughout the world. They also made a brief stop in Newfoundland, but all they found was snow and a little cove to hang out in. A scouting ship was also sent to this general area, but they were never heard from again. After not finding anything that appealed to them, the Portuguese named this place Canada, which roughly means nothing here, and left it for the British and French to deal with. The colonization of South America caused some friction between the empires of Portugal and Spain, and not the hey, let's intermarry between our royal families to create a super royal baby kind of friction. More the get off my land or I'm going to dig a trench along our border and push your nation into the Atlantic kind of friction. So Big Daddy Alexander VI stepped in and decided to put an end to this childish squabble by splitting South America in half, giving one half to Portugal and the other to Spain. Like all parents though, he had a favorite, and as you can tell by the map he drew between Portugal and Spain, the Portuguese were definitely not in first place. Despite not receiving much love from Big Papa Pope, Portugal represented the height of Western civilization. This is because geographically they're the most Western European nation, so it had to lead the world in forward thinking. Portugal was the first nation to become 100% Catholic. It was the world's leading naval force for centuries. They were the first Europeans to connect to India via a sea route, and since they were the first Europeans to reach Japan, they were able to get their hands on some waifu pillows before any other European nation, providing their sailors with much-needed companionship. The thing the Portuguese Empire is best remembered for is their extensive trade empire, primarily monopolizing the trade of spices and people. The Portuguese spice trade began when the Ottomans seized Byzantium and controlled the land route of spices moving from Asia to Europe. And the Europeans were like, I want spices, but I really don't want to pay all these non-Christian taxes on it. So Portugal was all like, don't worry guys, look, we can just go around here and boom, spices. The Portuguese slave trade began when the Europeans were like, I wish I had more free labor available to me, but there's only so many other Europeans I can viably enslave. So Portugal was like, don't worry guys, look at all these Africans we can enslave, and boom, Atlantic slave trade. Now, again, it should be noted, Portugal is the height of Western civilization, and therefore they must be the most progressive nation at all times. So they were very diverse when it came to their slavery. Man, woman, child, black, Arabic, Indian, Chinese, Japanese, Slavic, Scandinavian, whatever. No matter your race, age, sexuality, or gender identity, if they could get their hands on you, you'd be shipped off to Brazil to begin a new life of harvesting sugarcane. And if that's not equality, then I don't know what is. Also, keeping with the progressive ideals of Imperial Portugal, they were much more open towards the idea of interbreeding between native Portuguese people and those who were enslaved or native to the areas Portugal colonized. Despite being one of the more powerful empires in the world, Portugal was not very populous. They needed a way to deal with their shrinking population and growing incel problem before it became a strain on the great empire. The Portuguese government started a grand campaign to get their distraught youth to go out into this brave new world and fuck some foreigners. They presented this as a way to help expand the reach of the glorious Portuguese empire, and as far as the Portuguese government was concerned, if a child had at least one Portuguese parent, that child was Portuguese. Now, this system wasn't perfect. Actually, since it was based around slavery, the system sucked massive cock, but one good thing did come from this. It was through this system that my mom and dad met. So look at it this way. Since slavery happened, I was able to be born. Actually, now that I think about it, this really is the worst timeline. Upon my birth, Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Guterres was there to greet me with my complimentary bottle of rosé, a soccer ball, and official Portuguese person certificate. Anyway, eventually empires became less and less popular. It turns out people actually like having their independence, so one by one Portugal's colonies started breaking away from them. The spice trade got stolen from them by the Dutch, Great Britain told everyone to stop using slaves, and the Portuguese populace told the monarchy to fuck right off. Then Portugal went through its midlife crisis, which for European nations means going through a fascist phase. They changed their flag's colors from white and blue to red and green. This didn't go over well with some of the non-fascists who decided to relocate to a series of islands owned by Portugal, and founded their own country known as the Azores, with their beloved blue and white on their new flag. Eventually, Portugal relaxed and once again took its place as the pinnacle of Western progressive society, bringing us to today. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hold on a minute. You just went through the entirety of Portuguese history without skipping over a single moment, and not once did you mention any kind of war with another European nation. And if there's one thing I know, it's that historically, Europeans love their armed conflict. While you are correct that Europeans do love inflicting pain and suffering on others in order to further their own national goals, you'll be happy to know that Portugal was never once involved in any major conflict against another European nation. Portugal was buddied up with Spain and Great Britain for most of its history. Why would they ever need to get involved? Picture the 2016-2017 Cleveland Cavaliers. Great Britain is LeBron James, Spain is Kevin Love, Portugal is the rest of the team. They don't have to do anything, just sit back and watch the other two work. The only times things got a little hairy in Portugal were two separate events where some asshole from Central Europe was trying to take over the entire planet, and they started marching through Spain. So everyone in Portugal just left to Brazil until somebody took care of them. Portugal today is a prosperous nation with high living standards, a deep sense of patriotism, and so much freedom you wouldn't know what to do with it. You're free to do whatever drugs you want, and then you're free to have a group of medical professionals wean you off of it after it starts destroying your life. You're free to have sex with anyone you want, assuming that they are a consenting adult. It's freedom, not anarchy, you fucking degenerate. You're free to play any sport as long as it's soccer. You're free to practice any religion you wish. Be careful though, a few Portuguese citizens suffer from what's known as the des Vault tic, a form of Tourette's where the patient occasionally crusades involuntarily. In conclusion, Portugal is objectively the greatest European nation in history, bar none. I'd like to dive deeper into some specifics of Portuguese history and culture, but I'm lazy and I don't want to work on this video anymore. So another time, maybe. Until then, I sincerely recommend taking a trip to Portugal if you get the chance. I went once when I was 2 years old, and I remember it like it was about 20 years ago. So clear as day and nothing but fond memories. 10 out of 10, would visit again. Now I'd like to give a quick shout out to some of my patrons. Magnum, Doffy, Ben, Daniel, Cole, Gavin, Snaby, Sean, and Nick. And now a word from some of these patrons. Magnum says, I'm quite peeved. Doffy says, the time is almost here. Go and lay the groundwork. A world where only true people can survive will soon be upon us. Those without power, flee while you can. The tide will bring those of unmatched power, and the new era will begin. Okay, that's either a quote from like a dictator or some weeb shit, and either way, I'm upset. Ben says, shout out to Olivia, the only Portuguese person I know. Cole says, picky people pick Peter Pan peanut butter. 'Tis the peanut butter picky people pick. Ooh, first try, baby. Fuck you, Cole. And Gavin says, hi, Mom. Hi, Gavin's mom.